My name is Norm Volsky, your host, and this is the Digital Health Heavyweights Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Digital Health Heavyweights Podcast with my esteemed guest, Robin Glass. Robin is the president of Included Health, and we're honored to have you on the show. Welcome, Robin.
Thanks, Norm. It's great to be here.
Thank you for
gloves.
stepping into the ring. I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. So it's really nice to have you on the podcast. You have gotten shouted out before in terms of your company. Michael over at EHIR mentioned, back in Included's Grand Rounds days that you guys used to hand out a golden ticket to like employee benefits leaders, as well as some of the EHIR folks. And, he used it and it really, was beyond valuable. And you really helped him and his wife navigate a pretty tough moment in their lives. So appreciate all that you do and Included in your, really whole company. So curious, you went to Duke and then you found your way into healthcare. How did you find your way into healthcare?
Well, to be totally honest with you, Norm, I would say I stumbled my way into healthcare. So you're exactly right. I went to Duke. I studied public policy there with a really clear intention of doing something in the world to have social impact. But I had no idea it would be healthcare. In fact, I thought I'd do something in education policy or the like. And when it came time to get a job coming out of school, the best job I could find was in health policy and healthcare consulting specifically. And so I decided to give it a shot. And I spent probably the first 6 or 7 years of my career thinking it was a bit of an accident that I was in healthcare and that eventually I'd go do something outside of the field. And that was actually one of the reasons I went back to grad school, was this idea that I was going to pivot industries. And I spent my first summer internship outside of healthcare, and I just realized how much I missed it. And so from that moment forward, there was, a sense of purpose about being in healthcare. And my conviction that that was the field I wanted to be in for my whole career really went up at that point in a big way.
That's great. After completing your MBA from Harvard, what was the job you got after that?
Yeah, so I did a joint program. I was actually at the Kennedy School studying policy and then also at the business school getting my MBA. And, looked at a range of different companies in healthcare and had a few options to go to sort of like bigger, more established companies, and ended up deciding to go to a much smaller company, a much more entrepreneurial place. It was called Whole Health at the time.
Okay.
And so I signed up to go there to do on-site health centers for large employers because I really loved the model of delivering primary care right where someone is at their workplace. And interestingly, 6 months after I got there, Walgreens bought us and our largest competitor. And so I went from having intentionally gone to this very small place to being at one of the largest companies in the country. But it was an incredible ride. The opportunity to merge with our largest competitor and sort of like see the inner workings of that business and then get rolled into the take care unit of Walgreens, which at the time was their retail health unit. And then, ultimately really to get to see the entire range of the Walgreens business was super fascinating. So it wasn't what I expected, but got a lot out of it just the same.
That's really, really interesting. Talk to us a little bit about what you learned working at Walgreens, on their employer-focused business.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really neat model from the standpoint of Walgreens has such a wide range of assets. And so the fact that we could offer both the on-site health center that was really geared toward the population there, we could pick out clinicians that were custom fits for their cultures, and then also be able to leverage the retail footprint for other points of entry into the healthcare system, combined with their very broad and deep pharmacy capabilities was really exciting. I would say at the time, Walgreens wasn't able to take those assets and have that materialize into as powerful as an offering as it could be. And so that's actually probably one of the reasons I ended up going to a more entrepreneurial place next.
Yep.
And, it's exciting actually to see that Walgreens is making a whole lot of progress these days. So it was interesting both in terms of the range of possibilities, but then also sort of seeing how a large company like that tries to address, the change from a culture standpoint too.
Did you go directly from Walgreens to Evolent?
I did. I
All right,
did.
talk to us about that transition. That's like a big
Yeah,
leap to go
it
from a
was.
huge corporation to something that ended up becoming really large and successful. But by the time you joined, like it was still pretty early.
It was very early days. So one of my classmates from business school was Seth Blackley.
Hmm.
He was one of the co-founders of Evolent. And so he started talking to me about coming to join this company that they were starting. It took me about a year to, work up the nerve to change environments so dramatically. So when I joined Evolent, I think there were about 60 employees. And we were only a little bit more than a really good PowerPoint deck about how the world was shifting to value-based care. And it was a really, really fun ride. Those early days at Evolent were probably some of the most fun times I've had in my career because we just had a tremendous group of people rallied around a really big idea. And we were in the market at a time when all providers were starting to think about value-based care as something that might be an imperative to their businesses going forward. It was right as the ACA was coming out. And so it felt great to be raising a topic and providing support and expertise in a place where people really needed it within the healthcare field. So those early days at Evolent were a ton of fun. And it was a transition, going from a really large company, but honestly, it was a really gratifying transition. It felt like my day-to-day contributions had a level of impact that's just hard to do when you're working at a company of over 200,000 employees.
Yeah. Can you kind of walk the, listeners through exactly what Evolent was doing? Because I think a lot of people know of the success story and they see the big number in terms of the big exit, but like a lot of people aren't all that educated on what you guys were doing and, what the impact was ultimately
Yeah,
on customers and patients.
yeah, and it's an interesting story because it's actually changed a lot.
Mhm.
Even since I've left, I admire the way the company has moved with the moving market into places where they can have the most impact. But back in those very early days, we were focused on how you take provider organizations and help them move away from a pure fee-for-service model
Mhm.
into one of value-based care. And so, a lot of that was just really helping them with the expertise that they needed to make that transition, the ability to build a new business model. And then we partnered with UPMC and all of the back office functions that they had built over a period of time to launch their own health plan so that we had all the capabilities so that a, local health system in some part of the country would be able to operate at scale in value-based care. And so we were really helping provider organizations to develop the strategic fortitude and the resources in order to move into a different business model. I'll tell you that one of my, career lessons is just how hard it is for organizations to make that kind of a shift. And so I think over time we saw quite a lot of those provider organizations retrench back into more of a fee-for-service model. And so where Evolent has gone since then is really migrating into the spaces where value-based care is more accessible. And so, even enabling payer organizations to more effectively manage risk and to partner with organizations like ACOs and the like, who are more kind of like wired for the
Mhm.
value-based care world than some of those traditional health systems were at the time.
Yeah, no, I've been in the healthcare space for 12 years plus now, and I'd say the biggest disappointment I have with the whole healthcare system is how slow hospitals have been to change and adapt. And
Yeah.
that's holding us back, I think as a country. And, without the payers and employers really pushing the envelope, I don't think health systems are going to move an inch, unless forced to. I admire the groups that really were forward thinking and really gave it a good shot. You mentioned UPMC. Any other health systems that you worked really closely with that were some of the early adopters and really great collaborators of Evolent?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch that come to mind, and a lot of them have sort of taken on different journeys since then. So I'm not even sure
Hmm.
if the particulars are what matters. What I would tell you is that almost all the time when we partnered with health systems that were really willing to go far in this direction, it took one or two highly visionary leaders inside that organization
Hmm.
who were willing to invest in something that represented some risk to their own careers. It was a really sort of bet your career moment. It was neat to see the players that were willing to do that. And some of them were highly successful. Others, didn't even get to see the full transition for a variety of reasons. And then, over time, I think we started to partner with a lot of ACOs that were perhaps, better set up to really lead with primary care and things like that that are most impactful for value-based care.
That's really, really great to hear. In terms of learning experience, I think, when someone's within a company that grows that quickly, there's just so much you learn from those experiences, and you can take that to your next success story. So, like, what did you learn most from Evolent's meteoric rise, and ultimately very impressive exit?
I would say the most important thing I learned at Evolent is really the power of people, which
Hmm.
is probably something you're hearing a lot in your conversations, and certainly
Yeah.
something given your career that you believe in wholeheartedly. But,
Hmm.
we managed, I think we had a few things going for us. One, we had a mission that felt really compelling to the people that joined us and kind of like attracted a certain type of person who wanted to see how things could be different in the future.
Hmm.
And then we built a very strong culture that put people and mission at the center of everything that we did. And I'm really proud of the way that, even the 2000th or the 3000th hire seemed to understand that mission, that culture, our values very, very deeply. And one of the things that's been really fun to see is even the way the alumni
Hmm.
has represented out in the healthcare industry. And you just sort of like know when you're dealing with one of the folks you worked with at Evolent that it's going to be someone of high quality,
Yeah.
that they're, share some of your core values about what the healthcare system needs to do. And so it's been really fun sort of bumping into folks and doing work with people that I was with at Evolent. So I think sort of like the notion of prioritizing that above all else is super important. I think another lesson that I take from my time at Evolent, because we went public relatively early in our progression, I feel super lucky that I got to have that experience as early in
Hmm.
my career as I did. And I realized the advantages that being a public company affords you.
Hmm.
The Evolent team has done an absolutely brilliant job with their M&A strategy. And, so much of that is made possible by having the capital access that being a public company has. But it's also really important to just appreciate that that's a really big change.
Yeah.
And I think you hear a lot of companies sort of talking about that as an endpoint unto itself. And the analogy I would offer is that's sort of like fixating on your wedding instead of
Mhm.
fixating on the marriage. So I think that it's really important not to just sort of like be racing toward that because somehow that's going to feel like this huge milestone because it's like the work only just begins
Yeah.
at that point and you're forever beholden to a quarterly cadence in terms of how you have to think about the world. So it necessarily takes up a certain amount of mind share to be public. And so I guess one piece of advice I'd give folks out there who are leading their companies through this journey is just don't be too much in a rush for that moment. Like really appreciate what comes after that
Mhm.
as the more important part of the process.
Yeah, Evolent was one of the first companies, in health transformation to IPO and was truly a pioneer. So a lot of groups definitely look up to Evolent in that, and I know a lot of people are going to be, you know, edge of their seat, ears perked, to hear that advice because it's really, really good advice. When did you kind of make the decision that, hey, Evolent's been great. I did a whole lot of good things here, but I'm ready for my next challenge and, moving over to Doctor on Demand. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So I'd been at Evolent for I think about 7 years, and I had already started talking with Frank Williams, my boss, about the fact that I was probably ready to take on just like a click more responsibility. I was the chief customer officer, but there were 3 founders at Evolent. They were sort of at the very center of the action. And so I kind of wanted one of those spots, to be honest with you. But I hadn't decided what that would be. And I even thought I might take some time in between things. And I got a call from a recruiter asking me to meet with the CEO of Doctor on Demand, Hill Ferguson. And I'm just going to admit that my first reaction was like, telehealth? That's kind of narrow. Like I'm used to these like big system-wide ideas at Evolent. This seems sort of like a narrow part of the healthcare system. But I decided to take the meeting. And as you can tell, my observation didn't age well. But that being said, I sat down with Hill actually the very first day that Doctor on Demand launched virtual primary care. And so he had been spending the entire day pitching the story to reporters. And he started explaining it to me. And given my background in value-based care, this notion that you could deliver a really comprehensive version of primary care that would be more cost effective and frankly more accessible to more people really got my attention. And he was also describing to me the partnership that Doctor on Demand had forged with Walmart and with Humana. So one of the leading health plans and one of the leading employers in the country, both of whom I already had a lot of respect for in terms of innovation. And it just really got my attention that this was going to be something big. I, of course, had no idea that the pandemic was coming or any of that. The ride turned out to be even more wild than I expected, but it was a great opportunity to come into a company that I believed, and this turned out to be very true, had built something really special and was kind of like ahead of its time in terms of the sort of impact that it could have.
It's incredible, not only from a financial standpoint, the transformation to virtual, but also like the improvement in clinical quality. I think a lot of people are of the belief that if it's in person, it's better. If it's telehealth, there's only so much you can, be able to do, from a clinical standpoint. If you really look at the research, and you do it right, it's actually higher quality and lower cost at the same time. Can you just walk the audience through that and explain truly why the myth of in-person is better isn't necessarily the case?
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think it is something where there are a lot of preconceptions about why in-person primary care in particular would be more effective than virtual. One of them is that ultimately you're just going to have to go to some in-person setting to get care. And we see in our data that 92% of reasons that someone would come in for care can be resolved virtually. So we actually track very closely our 14-day revisit rate, the number of people that come into us who then re-enter the healthcare system for a comparable reason within 14 days. And it's very, very low. So this concept that people can actually get their needs met. Another myth is that somehow this will privilege just those who are, really sophisticated from a technology standpoint and, already have lots of resources. We actually have studied the data. We did a study with Harvard back in 2020 and saw that we are disproportionately serving people from low income zip codes. And so I think this kind of care is really getting to people who need it most. And then, we see tremendous impact just in terms of getting people into preventive care that's required, reductions in PHQ-9s and GAD-7s from a behavioral health standpoint, and just a ton of people who say, this is the first time that I have a primary care provider who understands me and who I can get to when I need it. And so we're really, really excited about the impact it could have.
I'm just going to make a hypothesis. Could be totally wrong. I would guess that if a virtual provider refers you to another provider, you're more likely to go see that person than if an in-person provider refers you to another. Because again, like just the barriers You got to drive, you got to go to a new facility, a new area you're not as comfortable with, whatever it is. Like, there's a lot more roadblocks that in-person care provides until something gets serious enough where someone's like, okay, I'm willing to inconvenience my life to go do that because I'm actually really worried about what's going on.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the statistics that gets me the most excited is we looked at our primary care practice, and when a primary care provider has referred someone into behavioral health, and we've seen that they have a 25% higher likelihood of actually getting mental health care services after that referral in our setting than in other settings. And when you look at that for areas where there are higher Black and Latino populations, it's 35% higher. So just the healthcare system is just fraught with fragmentation and friction. So you go in, you have this visit, and someone tells you, oh, you should find a therapist or something like that. That just feels like now you've given me this other big project. I have to find someone who's in network, who's still accepting patients, all this. But if you can make that a more seamless experience where you're in the same app, finding another kind of provider, or maybe you have our navigation services, you actually have someone who can tell you, here are the high quality providers in your area, and do you want your help getting your first visit set up? That's just like a totally different kind of experience. And people, can be more compliant with the care that they need as a result.
Yeah, the old healthcare system makes you, kind of reminds you of like getting homework after leaving school. You got like more work to do, like from leaving the meeting than going into it. And it's just kind of a nice reminder, or not nice reminder, of that. So you were obviously a huge part of one of the most high-profile IPOs in the history of health transformation. The Doctor on Demand, Grand Rounds merger that became Included Health, I would argue, is probably one of the biggest mergers to happen in the space. Kind of walk us through like how that happened. What did you learn from it? What was your experience, in those two companies coming together to form something that's truly very unique?
Yeah. I mean, it was another one of the most exhilarating points in my career, I have to say. It made a lot of sense. I think that was one of the things that felt really clear to me from very early on. There is this way that I think care delivery and navigation fit together and provide, what we were just talking about, this integrated experience that members want and deserve. And so in terms of the, thesis of the merger, I think it was very strong. Another thing that worked really well for us is that the companies were extremely aligned from a mission and value standpoint. So much so that there was, literally overlapping words across the two companies. So I think I've been involved in a lot of M&A in my career, and I would say this was one of the smoothest experiences I've had, which was not to say it was easy, because it wasn't.
It's never easy.
It was super intense, but it really felt like, these are two companies that share a similar philosophy of how we want to change healthcare, and yet we're coming at it from two different ways. And so there was a lot of goodness in bringing them together. And I will tell you, the thing that I think we did the best, which is, I think, a really important piece of advice for others out there, is we did not say we're going to take 6 months and we're going to, not move things around for people. We said the innovation here is the integration. And so we are going to go on and do it. And it was the fastest integration that I've ever been a part of. We were out in market talking about the integrated solution, just in a matter of months after the deal closed. And we were pulling the technology and the care teams and all of that together in order to be able to launch with clients, less than a year after we'd come together. And, that was really intense. There's like a period of time there that's still a little blurry for me because we were just going so hard, so fast. But the market reaction was beyond anything I could have expected, just very, very positive. And the ultimate experience that we were able to create for members is something that I'm really proud of. And I think, we could have taken 2 or 3 years to do what we did in a year, and it would have probably felt a little bit better. But I think the other part of this is that there's a experience for everybody doing it of going through change. And I think oftentimes it's better to sort of like put your head down and get through that change rather than, drawing out that pain. And so I feel like that's probably one of the things that I look back on and say that was absolutely the right decision to move that fast.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And yeah, the market reaction's been great. I know the company's just done extremely well commercially, which is always a great thing. What do you think allowed the integration to not be seamless, because it's never super easy, but like what made the fit so good? Was it the people and culture being so similar? Was it the products just meshing really well? Like which one of those two was it more of? Because it sounds like it was both.
Yeah, it was definitely both. I think if I had to pick, I think it's always going to come down to the people on some level. Like I think I give Owen and Hill a ton of credit that they had a really strong vision. And then Owen led us through all of that change, kind of like really keeping us centered on where we were headed. And then I think our executive team came together well. And then, it's a testament to thousands of people within the organization who believed in something sort of like bigger than what they used to do and were willing to, bet on this future. So it's probably that more than anything else. But I think it also helped that there was just, we weren't doing this thing where we were just like creating cost synergies and having to like take two sort of comparable solutions and whittle them down to one. It was truly a 1 + 1 = 3 type of moment. And so that, of course, helps a ton.
They were super complementary for sure. A lot of people wonder when there's a company that has a CEO and a president, like what does each do? Every company's going to be different, but included, you're president of the company. Owen is CEO of the company, correct?
Yep.
How do you divide and conquer there? Like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you both do?
Yeah. I love working with Owen, which is why I'm smiling as you ask the question. So my main scope of responsibilities has to do with anything that touches our clients, any of the growth-oriented functions within the team, things like implementation and, any place where we're delivering at the client level. And I partner very closely with Owen when it comes to things like strategy and sort of like thinking long-term about where we're headed. And it's fun because Owen is also, like really, really brilliant at things like growth and how to work with clients effectively and all of that. And so we have a lot of fun when we get to do it together, but there's a whole lot of dividing and conquering that goes on. And so I think he would probably tell you that we've struck a good balance of, coming together when something's really important and there requires two of us, but there's also a lot of leverage associated with us both being out doing our thing.
That's great. And what I love about this podcast is we get to know, the people who join professionally, but we also get to know them personally. So talking about two leaders working really well together, you live in a household where I would argue there are two digital health heavyweights in the household. Your husband is CEO of Headspace Health. I believe he was a co-founder of Ginger, if I'm not mistaken.
He was a CEO of Ginger. He came to Ginger long after it was founded. So
understood.
Yeah. So it's funny because as I mentioned, I've been in healthcare my entire career and, seen it from all the different angles and have this sort of like well-studied view on it. My husband, Russ, is a serial entrepreneur. He's led a number of different companies and founded companies. And I guess it was about 5 years ago, he came to me and said, I think I'm going to go work at this mental health care company called Ginger. And, I was excited and sort of proud of him that he was taking all of his talents into a field that clearly needed it. But I was also a little daunted for him, like, you don't know anything about healthcare. And so I remember the week before he started his job, I was like bringing him my notes from grad school and like trying to explain, some of the nuanced stuff about healthcare. Because those of us who've been in the field, I think sometimes have almost like a elitist mindset of it's so complicated, it's like hard to learn and things like that. But Russ has done really well. He has both picked up a lot and also, I think, brought some new ways of looking at the problems, which I think is what we need in healthcare, honestly. And so he's got a brilliant mind for product and things like that. And yeah, it's fun. Like our three kids probably have heard more digital health buzz at the dinner table than a lot of kids have. But it's also really, really neat to have somebody who understands your world so well as a partner in life as well. So, we'll go on an after dinner walk when one of us is just thinking through an important business challenge and be good resources to each other. So it's great. A lot of fun.
Yeah. And how do you do it as parents? Like, those are two very taxing jobs. Like, Headspace is a huge company, I think, over $1 billion valuation. Currently, included is also in that category. You're the president of a huge company. Each of you probably have thousands of employees, that are working for your organizations. So like, how do you balance like all of that responsibility from a work standpoint and investor pressure and all those fun things with also like raising a family?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it was easy. So I'll just own that it's not. It's definitely, it has its moments where it feels a little like a high wire act. But that being said, we're lucky in a few ways. First of all, we have a ton of extended family in our area. And so just having people that we can lean on is a really big deal. We've had the same incredible human taking care of our children, our nanny, since our first was born. And so she's literally, I don't know what my career would look like, honestly, if it weren't for her. And then the thing that I feel really lucky about is that we have a real shared partnership on the home front. And so, Russ does at least half of the home stuff. If he were here, he might even try and goose that number up above 50%. But he's super involved, and we're sort of like, at the end of the day, like a very strong team on the family front. And so it feels hard, but you never feel alone.
I love that. Yeah. That's great to hear. Really nice. So you've had, exposure to multiple types of buyers. Some of your companies have sold to employers, some of them have sold to health plans, some of them have sold to both. In this very unique, economic climate, what is employer sentiment? What's health plan sentiment right now? And what advice would you give to companies selling to each of those two very unique buyers?
Yeah, it is a really interesting time. And I think we're all sort of watching with bated breath to see where the economy goes from here. On the employer front, I would say what's interesting about this moment is unemployment continues to be incredibly low. And so the need to think about attracting and retaining talent has not gone away at all. And that being said, we're in a highly inflationary environment with, storm clouds of what could come next. And so cost pressures are also super, super real. And so I think what employers are thinking about as they stare down the barrel of double-digit cost trend and also a need to put great benefits out into the world so that they can attract talent is just, how do I get good value? How do I find solutions that are actually being used by my employees, that are actually driving cost savings, and that aren't completely impossible to manage from an HR standpoint? And so the bias is very much towards the more integrated solutions and the solutions that are delivering real outcomes. And, that's a place where I think Included Health sits in a really good spot, just because it is a very comprehensive, you would call it a platform style solution. And it's one that members really, really value and actually really use. And, we're seeing some really exciting things on the outcomes front as well. For health plans, it's interesting because I think the integrated solution bias is supporting their businesses as well right now. And so that part of our business, the part where we're serving health plans, is growing, pretty substantially right now, and even faster than it had been, say, a year or two ago. And I would say that the health plans look to a solution like us, and this would be applicable to, I'm sure, a lot of your listeners. They look to us because there's a level of member trust and member engagement that we're able to deliver for them that is somewhat hard to recreate as a health insurance company otherwise. And then also just a chance to really build out innovation. And so, it's great to have a partner who's sort of like out in market working with employers all the time, understands what innovative offerings are going to be most resonant to members and to clients. And so I think those are probably a couple of the things that health plans are looking for the most right now.
Yeah. Health plans at a point saw companies like yours to be competitive because they're like, well, we have these armies of care and case managers that work for us and we can manage these patients. But I think they're starting to see it's harder than it looks. And, the results speak for themselves. Companies like yours just get better engagement and, help these patients choose the right clinical pathways better than, the old guard of health plans and the way they've done it in the past. So it's great to see the innovation. You mentioned just, costs. They are growing unsustainably. We cannot have double-digit growth year after year after year and thrive as an economy, as a country, let alone the single, employers or even health plans by themselves. So walk me through, in your opinion, because you just have a very broad view of the market, how you seeing the cost curve bend over the coming decade or two.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it's like we're running out of levers on some level. There has been a ton of cost shifting over to employees, and I think we're starting to exhaust the possibilities there. And so we are going to have to come at this a different way as an industry. And the way I think about it is we've got to figure out a productive way of helping people make good choices.
Yep.
Because there are a lot of choices that actually result in costs in the healthcare system. And so the way to get upstream of that is to build a level of trust with an individual that you can then help them make better choices for their health outcomes as well as for costs. But you're doing that because they know that you have their best interests in mind.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons that Included Health, we have centered so squarely on the member in how we think about everything we do, is we want them to come to us and have an incredible experience every time. We want to address the need that they have immediately. And oftentimes it's actually a financial need. It's, I just got this bill and I don't understand why they're asking me to pay all this, that type of thing. But then we also want to sort of unpack what's underneath that. And, usually if you're getting a healthcare bill, it's because you have a health situation. And so by addressing their immediate need, we're building a level of member trust that then allows us to help them make better decisions going forward. And so, it's things like our expert medical opinion, where somebody gets a diagnosis, they're being told they need surgery. Now we can help them consider, do you actually need that surgery? Let's bring one of the national experts in lower back pain and let's have them opine on what would be the best course of treatment. And we're seeing that in 67% of cases with these expert medical opinions, it changes the course of care. But that feels really different if it's a conversation between a primary care provider that's on our team and an expert opinion from a great national expert on the topic than it is if I'm just getting, rejected in a prior auth. And so then, you're able to change the level of quality of care. You're getting inappropriate care out of the system. And that's where you start seeing, really big savings. And so I think, the notion that we're just going to kind of like slice and dice the benefits so it feels skinnier and skinnier is a losing proposition really to building the kind of trust and engagement with members that can turn around their health outcomes and ultimately impact costs.
Yeah. And the included health growth and like their ability to pivot has really impressed me. Like every competitor Grand Rounds legacy had Best Doctors, Second MD, Consumer Medical, they all sold, their point solutions to bigger vendors. Best Doctors to Teladoc, Second MD sold to Accolade, and then, obviously Consumer Medical sold to Alight. Owen and team pivoted and they said, okay, like we've got this great solution. It's very valuable, to all of our employer clients, but I want to be able to deliver more.
Yeah.
For them. And through the merger with Doctor On Demand and some other like big pivots, you've created this new market category and ultimately competed with other companies in a space that was already, established and are holding your own. So now you guys see Accolade and Quantum as your competitors, where some of those other companies sold for really, really nice sums, but at the same time, there wasn't like a second iteration of those companies. Yeah. And that's what I think Included did just a really, really impressive job of. You've been recognized, by multiple publications as one of the most respected leaders, in all of digital health. Can you walk us through some really influential moments in your life or your career that have shaped you into the leader that you are today?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, by the way. That's very kind of you. It's interesting. It's a little hard for me to boil it down to moments, although I'll try to an extent. Although I think that leadership is something that sort of like grows in you in this pretty gradual way for the most part. I think the first thing that I would say is one of my strengths and my guiding lights as a leader is my sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. And I would bring that all the way back to my childhood. I grew up, both my parents were public school teachers who ultimately went into the mental health care field. My dad was a child psychiatrist and my mom was a counselor. And so what was valued in my household was having social impact. Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about, fancy IPO exits or anything like that in my house. And so I think I always knew that purpose was going to matter a lot to me. Mm-hmm. And it still does. It's literally what gets me up in the morning is thinking I'm going to have some sort of impact on people's lives in the work I do. And I think when you have real clarity on that, a lot of other things as a leader get simplified. Mm-hmm. And it's much easier to do your job well. The second thing I would say is I've learned a lot about embracing change and leading through ambiguity. And mm-hmm. I would say the moments in my career that have strengthened my muscles in that way are moments where I had to do big restructurings. The pandemic was a great opportunity to learn what it's like to be in just complete ambiguity. Mm-hmm. And, the merger and other mergers I've been a part of, but especially this last one, mm-hmm. Really gave me a chance to figure out not only how I react to change and ambiguity, but how I set other people up to function successfully in mm-hmm. that environment. The last thing I would say that I think has been an important ingredient in the cocktail of my leadership is authenticity. Mm-hmm. And that one is like very much a journey. I can't point to the exact moment, but I think especially as a woman leader, you sort of get this sense of what perfect looks like and you're trying mm-hmm. to like check all these boxes and stuff like that. And at some point I developed the sense of self enough, the confidence enough to just decide I'm just going to be myself. And I bring kind of a lot of my personal life into my work. And I sort of like try to invite that of other people. You have to be respectful of some folks for whom that's not a comfortable place to be. But I think authenticity has played a big role in my ability to connect with the people I lead. And so I think that's another really important attribute.
Yeah, I think being approachable is really important. And the more success you have in your career and the higher your title gets and the more success your company gets, like it's hard to feel approachable unless you're really, truly authentic. And you've done a phenomenal job of that, which is, really nice to see. Can you give me an update on Included Health Where are you guys today, and
Yeah.
where is the company going in the next handful of years?
As highlighted in my description of our merger, we've been busy. We've
Hmm.
been super busy. The combined version of Included Health, which is both navigation and care delivery, we
Hmm.
refer to as all included care. So we got that out into the market very fast after our merger and have seen really exciting traction, both in terms of clients really subscribing to the model, but also very importantly in terms of the members. And we are seeing engagement rates over 60% with some of our clients. And we're also seeing that the members that we do reach come back to us again and
Hmm.
again. So on average, they're using 5 different services from Included Health when we have that entire chassis of all included care available to them. So,
Listeners, you don't know how rare that is. If you're not
oh,
like in the know, that is exceptionally high.
yeah. No, I very much appreciate that that is not something to be taken for granted. And so, I think this notion of being a place that someone can come to get care and
Hmm.
to be supported through their care journey is a really, really big deal to us.
Hmm.
And I think as we continue to innovate off of that model, we'll be looking for more and more ways that we can meet the member and their needs. And, we talk about a real longitudinal experience. So,
Hmm.
really building a long term relationship with our members. And this isn't just about them coming to us for virtual care. This is also about making sure that they get to the best possible place for in person
Hmm.
care when that's required. We're doing some interesting things right now to bring care into the home. You may have seen our partnership with Dispatch announced. And so I think we'll continue to build out the chassis and the resources that are available to members on that, with this idea that the integration is going to really be able to drive the outcomes that we're looking to deliver.
What is Included Health's perspective on, really providing care to underserved populations?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question because that's a huge part of who we are. Our mission
Hmm.
is to raise the standard of healthcare for everyone, and
Hmm.
we take the everyone part really seriously. Soon after we did our merger, we also acquired a company actually where the Included Health name first came,
Yep.
that had been founded by Colin Quinn to serve the LGBTQ plus community.
Hmm.
And the whole idea here is that you've got a population of people who have been historically underserved, even marginalized by the healthcare system,
Hmm.
and for every reasonable reason have in cases opted out of healthcare and really only entered when they absolutely had to. And so the idea behind communities, which is how we have renamed that
Hmm.
offering, is to help people to re-engage with the healthcare system, to get affirming care, to get culturally concordant care, and to really curate their experience so that they can get to providers who are high quality and culturally concordant. And within the last year, we've launched a comparable offering to Black and African American
Hmm.
members who also struggle with bias in the healthcare system, discrimination, and just a general lack of access. And I'm really excited to say that we have 4.2 million members across those two populations getting services through us and from us. And yeah, I think we hope to get to a point where there's enough health equity that we don't need specific solutions for different populations. But honestly, we're quite a ways away from that. So it feels really, really good to be helping to ensure that we're closing some of those gaps.
That's fantastic. And I think in the history of corporate mergers, from the three companies combining, Doctor on Demand, hundreds of employees, Grand Rounds, thousands of employees potentially. Maybe it was in the high hundreds, maybe it was over 1,000. And then Included Health had maybe 50 or so. And that's the name that stuck on. Like, I think it might be a moment in history when three companies merged, and the smallest by far of the three is the name that was kept. So, really love to see
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And it's a great name because it applies to the everyone. It applies to this notion of the people that we serve. We all want to feel included. It also applies to the solution. It is this idea that there's been so much subtraction in healthcare, and this is a place where we're coming at this from a point of addition, and that we're bringing a more comprehensive, integrated experience. And so, yeah, I really love the name.
Yeah, I think the market does as well. Let's move from professional back to personal.
All
What do
right.
you do for fun? What do you do to, let off steam from a very
Yeah.
stressful job?
And on my free time, right?
Yeah, with all your free time as you're building a family and you have a husband who also runs one of these very successful unicorns.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of things I love to do for fun. Probably the most consistent part of it is I like to do it with friends and family. So whatever
Hmm.
it is, if I can be surrounded by the right people, then it's fun. But I'm big into exercise. I love being outdoors. So whether that's
Hmm.
hiking or running or increasingly walking, that's a big deal for me. I love travel. And so my husband and I, that's part of sort of like how we formed our relationship is
Hmm.
a few really important trips that
Which
proved
ones?
proved to us that we could get along for extended periods, and then also a shared feeling of loving to see the world. The trip that probably stands out the most is we spent 3 months down in Central and South America. This is
Hmm.
right before I was going to start grad school, and he had promised me he would move wherever I went to grad school. He did not expect me to get into Harvard, so he does
Hmm.
not like winters, and so I think he went on this trip with me because he said if I'm going to deal with three Boston winters, I got to know that this person is worth it. So we had a really incredible trip through Central and South America. We also did 5 weeks in Southeast Asia that stands out as well. And then I increasingly am loving being, I think this is sort of like something I appreciate more since the pandemic, listening to live music, being at concerts, things like that. So
I
I'm
agree.
prioritizing that more and more.
What are your favorite musical acts to watch?
Well, this is probably pretty cliche at this moment, but I went with my eldest daughter to Taylor Swift,
Uh-huh.
and I have to tell you, it blew my mind. She is just an absolute legend. So that was really fun. I also just got to see a show with Tina Turner.
Uh-huh.
It's about Tina Turner, and that was a ton of fun. And then just
The
to show,
musical.
yeah, the musical.
Yeah. My wife and
Yeah.
I saw it. It was really good.
And then I'm going to an Avett Brothers concert soon. So pretty wide
Very
range.
nice. I'm a throwback. I really like 60s and 70s rock. Big Grateful Dead fan. Love the Allman Brothers. Love the
Yeah.
band. Robbie Robertson just passed away, so I've been listening
Oh,
to that a
yeah, I
lot
saw that.
in honor. So those are my top three easily. And then, just live music, great guitar. That's my type of thing. I saw John Fogerty and Willie Nelson a couple days ago.
Oh,
That was
fun.
fun. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
an old soul. Like one of the best
yeah.
concerts I've ever been to was last year. Saw Elton John live. That was like
Oh,
life changing.
wasn't it? I
Yeah,
was
he was.
completely life changing. I'm so there with you. That
Yeah,
was an
he
incredible
was an
show.
incredible talent. And when he's like the
Yeah,
only person on stage and like a whole stadium of 35,000 people are just like in awe, it was pretty crazy. So
yeah,
yeah, I'm an old
yeah,
soul in that way.
yeah.
How
I
do
never miss
you,
a Willie Nelson show either, just so you
yeah,
know.
that's good. Yeah, no, it was fun for sure. So just from like you already mentioned for fun, you do a lot of like, things that are like healthy activities, hiking, running, walking. I think traveling's great because you end up walking a lot of the cities you're going to. Um, any other things, to de-stress that you highly recommend?
Yeah. I feel like I figured out some things in the depths of the pandemic when that felt
Hmm.
really crucial. And the thing that I do now that's different from how I approached it maybe a few years ago is I wake up really early. I mean,
Hmm.
for me, it's early. I wake up in the fives almost every day.
That's early
And
for anyone.
okay, the first thing I do is meditate. I could
Hmm.
insert a Headspace commercial right now, but I won't. But
Yeah.
anyway, and it's just like the very first thing the moment I wake up. And then the next thing I do is exercise. And I've gotten to the point where I basically work out every single morning unless, I've got a 5 a.m. flight or something like that. But it just feels like after I've done those two things, I'm ready to take on the world. And I think what I learned is if you put them first, they can't get taken away. Whereas if you're trying to exercise at the end of the day or something like that, something will always come up.
Yes.
But I think of that first hour of my day as being totally about me. And I don't feel apologetic about it. And it served me very well.
That's great. My last interview, which hasn't even posted yet, of Dan Perez at Hinge, the CEO, he puts his phone on airplane mode all day Saturday. And that's his mental health break.
I love that.
So I'm going to try yours. I'm going to try his. Hopefully that will, make my life and my wife's life easier. And my daughter will, I'm sure, enjoy the extra daddy time. So that's good. Last question, and I ask everyone this. I think, practicing healthcare is great, from a, exercise standpoint, but a huge determining factor of health is what you eat and what you put into your body. Any healthy recipes that you or Russ make that, number one, the family likes and is popular, and two, might be good inspiration for others that are trying to eat healthier?
Yeah. Russ is a great cook. He's probably, we both love to cook, but he's a more natural cook. But I think that the recipes that I'm maybe most famous for, or the cooking that I'm most famous for among my extended family, are my salads. I make like really simple dressings from scratch. I use shallots, Meyer lemons, good olive oil, a lot of dried thyme, and a few other seasonings, and like a tiny bit of a healthy sweetener. And then I just find it so fun. You can put so much into a salad. So I toast a lot of nuts. I put in a lot of fresh herbs, roasted vegetables, what have you, lots of fruit. And I always get a lot of compliments for my salads.
I'm a big fan of roasted vegetables in the salad. Like, it can't all just be raw. Like, you got to have some cooked ingredients in there as well. But I love that. That sounds delicious. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. So anyways, really, thank you so much for joining the show. Thank you for stepping in the ring with me on the Digital Health Heavyweights. And again, congrats on all of your success and all included health success. It's great to watch that company grow, and with you and Owen and others at the helm, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of continued growth since. So again, thank you so much, Robin. Thank you for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe below if you enjoyed it.